How's it going, everyone? This is Caleb from Cubo Gaming. The Halloween season is one of our favorite times of the year. Not only do the three of us get together and play scary games for our podcast's annual October series, but it's also just a good time for gaming. Scary games are just fun to play in general, although many times the good ones are unfortunately behind a paywall. Luckily, though, there are a lot of decent free scary games on Steam that are actually worth playing. So, we did the research and compiled the top 10 of the scariest free games that you can play right now on Steam. Starting our list off, we have the Obscura Experiment. The game centers around being on a spaceship from a mysterious company and things go wrong. I feel like I've heard of that plot before, but I can't remember where. Anyway, it's a first-person horror game that's definitely on the shorter side of things, probably around an hour or so, but it's got a lot of good features and value to it. The graphics look pretty good and the gameplay's solid. It also has some unique gameplay mechanics that kind of up the horror elements. It's very unique, and there's something about the whole stuck on a spaceship in outer space with no idea of what's happening or what is after you that just really gets the scare factor up there. It's a really good and short scary game to play, and we highly recommend checking it out.
The Walking Fish 2 Final Frontier is a comedy horror game with a very odd premise, but it's actually surprisingly fun. Despite the weird title, this game has a few interesting things going for it that I think make it worth playing. The slow-paced horror game brands itself as comedy horror, but the only thing that actually is comedy is a completely ridiculous model of the enemy. The game takes place on some sort of space station or spaceship, and you have just come out of hypersleep to find that your crew has awakened long before you did. At some point, through audio logs, you discover that the crew has locked a creature in the control room of the ship. As you solve more puzzles, eventually you turn the power on and release the monster, who gets loose and stalks the halls. The game has pretty decent graphics for a free game, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of SCP's Secret Laboratory as you're running around the hallways. The monster itself is pretty ridiculous, but the tension leading up to the point where you let it out actually is surprisingly well done. As you're playing it, it's obvious that it's just a free game made by a small studio, and the voice acting is kind of lackluster through the audio logs, but the rest of the game is actually a decent horror experience. I'd say the worst part for me was running around for probably 25 to 30 minutes trying to figure out what to do in the first area. Eventually I found it, and it was in this really obvious place, just kind of tucked away, but it was annoying that the game kind of wastes your time not really telling you what to do. Overall, the game is a decent, fun little game, and it has some slight tension. If you don't find the monster to be ridiculously dumb, then you might actually be entertained by this for a little while.
Timor Remake is a remake of a small indie horror game that was released back in 2014. It's relatively short, but what's included in this free horror title is a very cool experience. It is a dark and creepy game that takes you through abandoned locations that you need to escape from. As you progress through the levels, the enemies become more aggressive with their scares. Some of the jump scares can feel a bit cheap at times, but it is ultimately a very cool game. It is full of puzzles that you need to figure out, and has a Resident Evil style item menu if you enjoy that type of thing. There are also more Timor games by the developer Vidas Games, and they are all worth checking out if you enjoy horror games.
Wayward Harbor has one of the most unique horror gameplay mechanics I've seen in a while. The game is a first-person escape/puzzle-ish game that puts you in an abandoned fishing harbor, and you have to escape the monster that's hunting you down. It's not a long game by any means, and it's also not a story-packed game, but it's really unique and pretty scary. The main component of this game that makes it so unique and good is the mirror mechanic. You can't see the monster with just your eyes, so you need to utilize your mirror or mirrors around you to see it. It adds this layer of terror that I haven't experienced before, and it just heightens the experience. It's completely free, and if you want a game to get a quick scare out of, we highly recommend checking this one out.
Liquidators is a horror game based on the real-life Chernobyl nuclear disaster. You play as a team who's tasked to fix parts of the reactor before it causes continent-wide devastation. The main characters aren't really expected to survive, so a lot of the horror comes from the dialogue and the people talking to them, saying seemingly hopeless things. When one character takes on too much radiation, another one has to make the hard choice to either carry them out or just keep fixing things without actually saving them. The game does a great job of setting a depressingly bleak picture of a real-life disaster. Each of the characters has their own backstory that's kind of shown through the dialogue. You can even feel that some thought and emotion went into producing the characters. One example of how they do this is one of the characters' wives calls just so she can hear him breathe for the last time. I don't want to spoil too much of the game, but it has an overwhelmingly positive rating for a reason. I didn't see too many glaring issues with the game, other than the fact that it doesn't really tell you how to interact with the things you need to fix. Some of the areas were hard to navigate due to the graphics style, but for the most part I found that graphic style to be a huge selling point. While it's not a traditional horror experience, it's a solid horror game for people who enjoy getting immersed in a narrative or alternate history. I definitely recommend checking this one out.
Aeronoctosis, Put Yourself Together, is a co-op puzzle horror game that has you and another person exploring your mind and trying to escape. One person gets a flashlight and the other gets a camera, and you need to work together to defeat the creatures around you. The person with the flashlight shines it at the enemies, and the person with the camera snaps a picture of the creature, destroying it. If one person dies, then you both will die, so make sure to always keep an eye out. It's actually a really cool game that you can play with another person, and it is pretty creepy at times. There are also puzzles you need to figure out while watching out for enemies, so if you want a cool horror co-op game, then go check this one out for yourself.
Of course, we had to put Poppy Playtime on the list. Both Poppy Playtime Part 1 and the online multiplayer Poppy Playtime game are free on Steam right now. This game terrified me when I played it. I actually played it on stream, and it got me more than a few times with those jump scares. The whole atmosphere of the game is just so terrifying and creepy, and the whole story is actually really interesting. There's a ton of hidden lore and theories floating around, so you'll find yourself watching YouTube videos about it once you beat Part 1. I guess I should explain a bit about the game. So it's a first-person exploration platformer game with some heavy horror elements. You find yourself in an abandoned toy factory and you have to escape. I think you have to escape. I can't remember the exact plot, but basically you navigate your way through and try not to die. I know some of the community can be a little cringe sometimes, but honestly the game is a lot of fun, and if you're looking for a good scare, this game will definitely give it to you. I assume most of you probably have already played Part 1, but if you haven't, you should really try it out. It's completely free.
The Suits Have Gone Mad is a unique horror experience that satirizes modern corporate culture while also being a very unsettling game. You play as a regular employee of this fictional company, and all the employees wear black suits and are expected to act and talk the same. All the executives wear white suits, and through posters on the wall and dialogue, it's kind of implied that they have a lot of authority over the employees. The entire game is in black and white, which personally I think makes the game a whole lot scarier. All of the characters have the same exact player model, which I'm not sure if this is a creative choice or it was due to budget constraints from having a small team, but either way, I think it adds to the creepiness factor. In-game, you're tasked with doing menial activities like setting up a PowerPoint presentation. There are cameras everywhere watching the employees, monitoring everything they do. At some point, your character discovers something that you weren't supposed to, and corporate labels you as a dissenting employee, sending everybody after you. Initially, the game felt like it took place in the 60s, but after a while I realized they were using email and more modern technology. There also seems to be a lot of commentary here revolving around modern corporate culture and the villainizing of dissenting opinions. You can honestly overlook all that commentary, but I found it somewhat interesting. This game is basically what you get if you combine the premise of We Happy Few with the gameplay of The Stanley Parable, which is a weird combo, but I think it works really well. The graphics aren't amazing, but somehow the black and white filter actually makes up for that. I don't really have a lot of complaints about the game and was pretty much hooked from the second I started it. It just kept getting better as I played it, and at some point part 2 is coming out, which I definitely want to play. Honestly, this might be one of my favorite free horror games just due to how well they set things up and build tension. This is one of the few free horror games that actually left me thinking about it afterwards, and I highly recommend checking it out.
The Stoevii Curse is a very unique horror game if you like the old pixel graphic style of older games. The game is about a farmer in Bulgaria who is tasked with planting and harvesting plants. You start with a few tomato seeds, fertilizer, and water, and it is up to you to plant them and watch them fully grow. It isn't as tedious as it sounds, since the plants take like a minute or two to fully grow. Once grown, you can sell the crops at the end of the day for some profit. There is a full day and night cycle, and you need to be careful because the longer you spend at night, the creepier the game gets. The first couple of in-game days are pretty tame, but the farther you get, the crazier the game gets. We are not going to spoil exactly what happens. There is something that is after you, and you will need to find ways to get away from it. If you enjoy games that are unique, then this definitely is one you should check out.
Sparky Marky reminds me a lot of Poppy Playtime, and that's a good thing. For some reason, these types of games are terrifying to me. Maybe it's the uneasy setting and off-putting vibes, but I know I'm going to get a good scare when I play a game like this. Sparky Marky does not disappoint. The game places you in an abandoned children's recreational camp, and your goal is to uncover the mystery of what happened there. It's a first-person horror game, and the graphics and overall polish of the game it's amazing. The story is super basic and almost not even there, so I wouldn't even go in expecting a lot from that. But the gameplay is great, and the game is pretty scary and creepy. Oh, also part 2 is also free on Steam as well, and as of making this video, part 3 is coming out soon, as well as an online multiplayer version. So if you end up playing this game, you luckily have more to look forward to. It's honestly super similar to Poppy Playtime, so if you like that genre, then you're gonna like this. I personally enjoyed it a lot, and I highly recommend it. Alright, well that's gonna be it for this video. As always, we try our best to add as many unique titles to our videos as possible, but if we missed any, please let us know in the comments. Thanks everyone for watching, and we will see you in the next video.